In 2018, I had the great privilege to be a delegate speaker about my veterinary illustration career for the Institute of Medical Illustrators 50th Anniversary Conference in Harrogate. I showcased some of my work from some very prestigious clients, including Blackwell Science, now Wiley, the British Small Animal Veterinary Association, Cat and Dog Tags, Dorling Kindersley, Elsevier, the National Heritage Centre for Horse Racing and Sporting Art, and Pergamon Press. I spoke about my early beginnings, how I loved animals, and I was interested in how animals worked and were made better when they were sick. And I loved going to the vets, and I was fascinated by the vet's job and the whole working environment and the surgery and the instruments, and of course all creatures great and small. As a child, my father had some lovely old natural history books, really ancient tombs, and I enjoyed copying them out or colouring them in. It was a circuitous path which began at primary school in London, a secondary school in Norfolk, and then O-level music. I really wanted to do art, but it wasn't deemed as a vocational subject then. But I took art O-level with my A-levels, but I failed. While I was doing my A-levels, I had a Saturday job in a very trendy cafe in Norwich, and on the top floor was an artist's studio with 2 illustrators working. Heaven does exist after all, and I was advised to do a foundation course at art school, but I couldn't get a grant for that, so I moved to London and got a job at the Royal College of Surgeons of England. I worked with a vet there who wrote a lot of papers and books, and one day he asked if I would illustrate a book for him. 30 years later, I visited the Royal College of Surgeons of England and met up with a really good friend of mine, Professor Vishy Mahadevan, who has his own YouTube channel called The Funky Professor. But going back to 30 years ago, but I still wanted to be an illustrator, but I wanted to use art and science. So when I moved to Glasgow, I got a job as a volunteer graphic designer with the Scottish Wildlife Trust. And then I was offered a place on the Visual Communication Design degree course in scientific illustration at Middlesex University in London. And so I moved back to London and I graduated in 1994. My final year projects were on navicular disease of the horse, the super senses of the domestic cat. In my comments book at my degree show, Derek Coombs from Dorling Kindersley popped by. I was out, but he left a message for me to give him a call to discuss a book. So I illustrated the Encyclopedia of the Dog for Dorling Kindersley, written by Bruce Fogel, and this was my first big commission. My degree was a traditional degree. We worked in pencil and watercolours, and despite computers being around, we were taught to use watercolour. Just after I graduated, I saw an advertisement in the Guardian newspaper. Publisher seeks new ideas for magazine. So I sent in my idea, and I got the job. It was to be a one-woman show, no staff but just me. I was editor, journalist, assistant designer and illustrator, but what a fabulous experience. But by now, my veterinary illustration career had taken off. One of my first clients was Blackwell Science, now Wiley. But at last, all illustration commissions were asking for digital artwork, and so I taught myself all the Adobe software. It wasn't easy, but very rewarding. And so now I am all digital, and this is my workspace these days. I've illustrated manuals for the BSAVA since 1995, and the strange thing is my first ever commission when I was still working at the Royal College of Surgeons was the former Pergamon editor from Animal Handling Book. She was the commissioning editor now of the BSAVA. And since 1995, I work on 2 to 3 manuals a year for the BSAVA. Authors send me their sketches and I turn them into accurate, beautiful, colourful artwork. And it makes my day when I'm acknowledged, especially for the artwork. All sorts of treatments and effects can be done with digital. The lovely chrome and the highlights, a slick airbrush look, and fur and feather detail. Elsevier commissioned me to produce all the artwork, radiographic images of birds of prey. It was challenging but really exciting work, and I learned to. I was also commissioned to produce all the anatomical artwork for the National Horse Racing Museum in Newmarket. And when the centre was formally opened on Thursday the 3rd of November 2016, I met the Queen. My commissions are varied, and I really enjoy my scientific research into the artwork that I produce. I'm so fortunate to really enjoy my career, working with some incredible people, some great vets, and my love of animals.